Sound the alarms! Maxx has returned. If you haven't already heard, a brand new card has been announced for the OCG in Infinite Forbidden. We'll be getting into the TCG the weekend of the NEWCQ, and it is a doozy. People are saying it is the brand new Maxx, and it's none other than Multchummy Purulia. What does this card do? Let's take a quick look. It's level 4 Water Aqua with 100 attack and 600 defense. Aqua, we can use it for tier if they ever bring Kikalis back. Its effect is, if you control no cards, quick effect, you can discard it and then apply the following effects for the rest of the turn. Each time your opponent normals or special summons a monster from the hand, immediately draw one card. During the end phase, if you have more cards in your hand than the number of cards your opponent controls plus 6, shuffle random cards from your hand into the deck equal to the difference. You can only activate the effect of other Multchummy monsters once the turn you activate this effect. So, has Maxx returned? Are we in the end of times? Is this the scourge on the format that Maxx once was? Well, no. This is a clear attempt at a power curve to Maxx, something that is balanced, but still gives players who go second some sort of retaliation for the crazy combos that are available. One of the ways it fixes a huge problem Maxx had is with the clause that you have to control no cards. Now, you can argue that some decks may end on no cards naturally, but I'd argue that's incredibly rare, almost non-existent in fact. But what this serves to accomplish is you can't go first and make a board and then drop Multchummy or Maxx when your opponent tries to break it. Because if you ever played Master Duel or you played TCG years ago, that was one of the most demoralizing feelings.
Oh! This game!
Feeling like you had a chance to break a board, and like an anti-spell got flipped on you or any other floodgate that is terrible for the game, drop Maxx, and now if you don't kill them, their follow-up is going to be insane. They're going to have 10 cards in hand. They're also going to draw into hand traps to stop you from actually, accomplishing breaking the board. And it's just almost impossible to win. You pretty much have to kill them that turn through the hand traps they draw. And to say that's a challenge is an understatement. This is a very good way of power balancing Maxx. Maxx still would be very good if left with just that restriction. So the other thing they've decided to do is it only hits summons from the hand. That's a huge restriction, right? For us to contextualize this, it does kind of depend on the format. It may shift in and out of relevance in the same way Maxx almost did on its initial release when it was considered balanced. If we were to look at it in this current format, and you're playing versus a Snake Eye deck, what would this card serve to accomplish? Well, if you play it in the draw phase, because you want to hit the normal summon immediately, you hit a Snake Eye Ash or Diabell Star, and then you hit a normal summon, you hit a Poplar. So really you're drawing 2 cards, maybe 3 cards. Okay, is that enough to win you the game though? Well, Maxx would have been like 20 cards probably off the draw, which would have been probably an auto victory. This card here does not guarantee you the win by any means. In fact, when you're considering this up against any card you could have had instead, now those cards may already be in your deck, but you have to consider with any choice for a tech option, is it worth the other options that are available to us? And with this case, you're not going to be shutting down your opponents. You're not trying to stop them. You are trying to build up and accrue resources to take them down. And because you are typically drawing early in the play, thanks to the fact that it's monsters from the hand you're drawing off of, not cards from deck or extra deck, which usually come later in the combo, you can draw hand traps off of this to be good, but this could have been a hand trap in its own right. So unless you're drawing multiple hand traps off this relatively early, which, are typically unlikely, it doesn't maybe accomplish that much. And that's kind of my biggest concern for this card. If you're just drawing 2 cards, is this really what you would have wanted? When you're drawing breakers off it, that's all more fantastic, right? Because when we're playing a deck with board breakers in it, drawing 2, we can feel comfortable breaking the field. That's what our deck was already designed to do. And now it's almost as if we have played Pot of Greed, Pot of Desires, a card that is a natural inclusion in those type of decks. This card seems very much designed towards that. But remember, we're not just talking about one format. This card is a card that will now exist for forever until it's banned. How would this affect other decks? Let's look at Fluanderies, for example. If you draw this in the draw phase and you're playing versus Fluanderies, if I were to get a simple M-Pen on field, or giving you 3 draws, that's a lot more impactful. And that's not even a crazy turn from Flu's perspective. They have the capacity to extend further. And if they had chosen to do that, say get the double M-Pen play out or M-Pen plus Avian, now we're looking at like 6 draws. And it gets a lot more disgusting. It was funny how Fluanderies was immune to Maxx, but it almost seems like the biggest victim from this Multchummy card. Now, there's other types of decks that aren't normal summon dependent that also would have summoned from the hand a bunch. Danger decks, for example, would get absolutely slaughtered by this card. If I reveal a danger in a Thunder Dragon deck and you Maxx me, my Black Dragon, my White Dragon, my Dangers, we reach the point where there's actually a meaningful number of draws here, right? Like 4 draws is a lot. That gives you a lot of hand traps, gives you a lot of engine. That is a clear difference in terms of what we're accomplishing here. So yeah, the thing with this is it is going to be kind of format dependent in terms of how playable it is. And that's a good and a bad thing. Now, obviously, if it's format dependent, that means it's not obscenely overpowered like Maxx is. That should be clear. While it may see play immediately to some capacity, it's not going to be this automatic staple you include in straight up everything. And that's good, but take a look at the history books. Maxx was the same. And with the Konami's new card design, they've seemingly put a lot of poplars into decks. And what I mean is there was a new Galaxy Eyes or Tachyon poplar was announced, a Tenpai poplar was announced. And if that's the trend we go, Konami could easily start implementing more and more cards that summon themselves from the hand, and then this card turns into a problem just like Maxx was. Fortunately, we have the if you control no cards clause, so it can't be used in the same villainy that Maxx was, but it still could apply into the same vein as you're playing versus Flu. You win the roll, you go first, and you get shifted. And if you hated Shifter, and this is doing the same thing, this is still not good for the game. So that's my biggest concern, the clause of normal special summon only. While it seems like an appropriately fair option now, there's no telling that that's the future because it could very easily go either way. Now, a comparison I wanted to make just to show that the impact of drawing 2 cards is not insane is that while not necessarily the same thing, something like Phantasme and the Rescue Ace Impulse into Rescue Ace Fire Attacker combo both let you draw 2 cards and cycle your hand, fixing your hand in a way that helps you use board breakers or hand traps, and neither of which are deemed tier 1 meta playable. Now those options are both okay and both sometimes seen doing well, and they have fringe success. So that shows that Multchummy kind of fits into that specification. But those 2 draws, because the timing of them isn't immediate and it's only 2 draws, and it takes up the spot of another card, that in this current context, it wouldn't be a massive problem. And the card does have one other clause that kind of helps you protect against the Maxx problem of the card being overbearing. And then there's during the end phase, you have more cards in your hand, the number of cards opponent controls, +6, still random cards in your hand into the deck. So the biggest thing here is it's kind of like +7, because you got to keep in mind, if they have 1 card in the field, you'll end with 6 + 1, so 7 cards, and then draw to 8. So it's pretty much you're going to be starting a turn with 1 extra card, at the very least, if they control 0. And now this also won't factor for the fact you may have used hand traps during the turn to help set you up. And what if you're playing like Labyrinth and you discard cards that actually get you to engine into play rather than hand? That could be pretty good too. But the bigger point I want to get across here is that you actually will have a large number of cards in your hand, and I think +6 may have been too aggressive, because let's be really realistic here, right? Say your opponent ends on 1 Appaloosa as their way of mitigating the damage this card does, because it's several interruptions in a single card, and that's what you're looking for when playing against something like this, or you're looking for disruptions from the hand or grave. This card would make it so that you have 7 at the end of the turn, drawn to 8. Now, that's a +2, pretty good, and you kept your opponents off of at least, ideally, a full combo. And there, you're looking pretty favorable, because then this acted as disruption and as a +2. When a card does that, it's phenomenal. Now, I think maybe they could have balanced this in a way where it said number of monsters your opponent controls, because that would have been cool if your opponent can set some back row alongside this, and they don't feel like that punishes them as well. Like, if I had to reveal 3 dangers and turn that into an Appaloosa, I don't want to have to then be punished by setting trap cards. That seems like a little lame. Now, there could always be formats that come out in the future where there's a deck that ideally ends on 0 cards, and its disruptions exist entirely in the grave. Cards like Fairy Tale Snow and then the Runic's Princess or whatever. Or maybe 1 card on field is simply enough. If I was playing Cashier with a Rizard Legal, I'd make a Rizard at the cost of 3 draws to my opponent, because that's all I goddamn needed. And then your opponent would draw to their 7 in hand. But say I did summon a bit more and I made a Diablosis to rip apart your extra deck, and then I banished it from my field so you didn't have to worry about it being an extra card. At that point, you'd have to shuffle back a card, and maybe the 8 cards into the Rizard isn't enough. Now again, 8 cards is still so much, so it's hard for me to say that. Like, it's actually crazy how much a draw 3 matters versus a draw 2. But that's not to mean that there isn't a deck in the future that has an even more impressive single monster than, say, a Rizard, or just disruptions more centralized, hand or grave, or even banished pile, I guess. It's very important whenever you're thinking of a card that's generic and a staple, like in this sense, that you future-proof think it, because otherwise you'll miss out on great potential of some of these cards. And that gets me to the main point in my concern for this card. This card looks fantastic in the current sense. It's like a Pot of Greed when you go second versus most decks right now, and that's pretty fair balancing. Like, that's a card that is worth playing, but not screamingly broken, and if my opponent activates it on me, I'm not going to have a fit of rage. But it leaves the option for the future where there are decks that exist that will have to pull their hair out when this card is played on them, right? What if Flu was ever meta again? Can it never be meta now? because this card will just ruin their day. This or Droll. Now there's 6 copies of auto lose cards. There are decks that exist now that have a bunch of auto lose cards that exist in the game. So maybe that's okay to have. It just makes these decks unplayable. It's a weird question to ask. When it becomes a problem is when a deck's power level is so absurdly high that you can't not play it just because a card like this exists. And I mean, that's what Maxx kind of does, right? Like with Maxx, you can't just not special summon. It'd be insane not to. Your deck is way less powerful if you don't. But if you do get Maxx, you do what? And yeah, I mean, just like Maxx, this will have the same outs to it. You can use Ash Blossom, you can cross it out, you can call by it. But I'd prefer if that's not where the game got to. That brings us to Master Duel, and we complained enough about that as is. So yeah, Infinite Forbidden and WCQ will be super interesting. This card will be fine and will be played on release, but maybe not in the same extent. Probably not in the main deck, because it's not worth the risk of drawing dead card going first for just the Pot of Greed going second. Probably in the side deck, but my main concern is on the future. And we'll see if this card one day haunts us in the same way that damn Cockroach does. If you want to see other reacts from me, go check out my highlight channel, Jesse Kotton Highlights. Now, this one is just for the main channel, but usually when a new card is announced, I do it live on stream, give my thoughts as I react to the card and I see it for the first time. This is a great way for me to get first impressions and to communicate with you guys about all the crazy combo possibilities that exist with the card. For example, the Whitewoods reaction video, which has some crazy cards and had a blast talking to Twitch about it. So make sure to check that video out and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more stuff like that. Anyways, that's all for now, guys. I'll see you all later.